Yeah, so for example, if an organisation today has a shared service where they're delivering processes and maybe IT to the business, a centralised model might fit quite well within a shared service because they already have a lot of the processes set up to be able to work closely with the business, work closely with IT, to identify opportunities for process improvement and automation. And in having those RPA skills within that function is generally a good place to start. Sometimes we see that when an organisation tries to deploy RPA through a non-centralised model, that there's an issue between IT and business in terms of who owns this and how does that relationship work. In a shared service as well, that and a centralised model, you generally get ownership from IT as part of that centralised COE. So the challenges there in terms of getting infrastructure provisioned, security, risk, all of those challenges that we see today within RPA programs can sometimes be a lot easier to overcome in a centralised model because you have ownership and direction from stakeholders to running that approach.
Also, one of the things we were talking about earlier, Andrew, was the centralization of audit, security.
Yeah.
A lot of the non-functional requirements that quite often are such a big part of projects,
yeah,
and are underestimated.
Definitely, yeah. I guess some of the other positives as well about a centralized model is around, if organizations go with a top-down approach for automation. So a centralized COE normally has budget assigned to it, has stakeholder engagement, which makes it very easy to then fund an automation program. If we see on a non-centralized model, if we see organizations going with that approach, then sometimes the pockets of automation that start up don't always have the right funding or the right buy-in, which creates challenges as soon as you try to scale.
I think the other benefit of centralized is it gives you an opportunity quite often to focus outside of departmental work or second, because you get so many of the benefits for any technology, particularly for RPA, when you solve the root causes of issues that sometimes start in one department or one part of the business and span several others. Where the decentralized, a non-centralized approach, sometimes it's a challenge to get those things even on the table because they're looking for those low-hanging fruit.
Of course, yeah. But on the flip side of that, sometimes we see a centralized model. Some of the cons of the model is that it's difficult sometimes to get buy-in from the different business units, especially if it's deployed within a shared service. So going out there and having to sell the idea of automation to process owners, to business users, to business owners, to say, we want to take the work that you're doing today and automate this. There can sometimes be resistance, again, especially if it doesn't have the right stakeholder buy-in. And it also needs to fit the existing business. So if you try and go and deploy a centralized model in an organization that's highly federated, again, it's not going to work because the P&L and the budget for automation doesn't sit within a centralized function. So it becomes quite hard to do that. However, the way that some organizations have achieved that is through doing RPA as a service. So the shared service function has created a managed service around automation. So they sell automation services to the rest of the business, which again, really, and they can cross-charge infrastructure, development, process analysts, project management to the different business units. And that's working really well because then the business has the opportunity to do it themselves or use a centralized managed service to do that on their behalf.
So I've managed a centralised function, I would say, and I've worked in I've managed a decentralised function too. So the centralised for me means that you've got complete control over what's going on. It also means that when you're working with those other departments, you can see the opportunities that span across those different functions. It also means that when you're doing your planning for your machines, for your infrastructure, that it's all contained in one place and you can plan for the entire business. There's a lot of work involved. You have to work with all the different departments. You have to make sure that you have got excellent relationships. But once that work's done, it's done and it's there and it's embedded. The one thing then to be careful of is making sure that you don't create bottlenecks. Because if you are then that centre of excellence and everyone's coming to you, you then have a lot of people coming to you and wanting to have a lot of automation. But I found the centralised model to be a really great success.